The Nimble with Numbers team presents Chalked Blocked with Bo Big Time McBrayer.
I gotta know what a $5 shake tastes like.
That's hot. That's hot.
I want winners, Bo. You don't know diddly.
And his partner, Scott Stag Simpson.
Do you know who I am?
Trying to put Tiger Bomb on this jungle's nuts.
That's cute. I remember when I had my first beer.
I gotta catch a glimpse of these warlocks. Let's make a move. Let's make a move. Let's make a move.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Chalk Blocked, the world's sexiest DFS show for now. You know Scotty Stacks at Nimble W Numbers on Twitter. I'm Bo, a.k.a. the King of Spice. Make sure you like, subscribe, and jingle that bell to get notified when we go live on YouTube. Speaking of bells, our guest this evening is one of the only guests we've had with a Wikipedia page. She is a board-certified orthopedic clinical specialist, strength and conditioning specialist, and injury expert who has been gracing my TV screen at home on ESPN since 2007. She is a co-host on the 06010 Fantasy Focus podcast with Daniel Dopp and dear friend of the show, Field Yates. She hails from the sacred ground of NorCal. Shout out. And did her thesis at Princeton on La Comédie Humaine by Honoré de Balzac. Please welcome to the show the very lovely Stephania Bell. How are you doing this evening?
Wow, I didn't know I was going to get the French stuff in there. That was a fine pronunciation by you.
That was 2 years. 2 years. I think I'm reading and writing fluent, but my accent is terrible because all I did was 2 years of college level. So
I didn't think it was terrible. I thought that was quite good.
I appreciate it.
Have you heard most Americans say that?
Oh, it's awful. They wonder why French people are rude to them when they go abroad.
Exactly. It's good to be back with you guys.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. I'm really excited. My daughter is in a French immersion program. Bo, she is impressed. So I got to say, as a non-fluent French speaker, I was impressed as well. And we're excited to have Stephania on. We've got a lot of fantasy football to talk with her about and get to, a lot of injuries and things going on. And also we want to get to know who kind of she likes this year. But first, we can't have the King of Spice. This is the Bo Big Time, officially King of Spice. Every guest has to, get their food takes out there. So we thought, Stephania, we would first jump in and get to know you a little bit food-wise. And the first question we had is, what was your favorite meal growing up as a kid? Like, if you thought about it, like it's my birthday or it's I'm getting my favorite meal. What rings a bell back in the day for you?
Okay, this is weird. I was a weird kid this way. I mean, like, I think when I knew you guys were going to ask me about food, I'm like, what do I love? Like, I love fried chicken. I think it's because it makes me think of going to the beach and having fried chicken or barbecue chicken, one of the two, because that was always what we had when we went to the beach. But if I was thinking about my favorite meal, and I went away, I actually lived in France for a few months. So I was living with it's a long story, but I was leaving the US and I was 10 years old. And the meal that I requested before I left was roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, because my mom made that really well. And that's a weird thing for a 10-year-old. It's very New England.
No kidding.
That knows that. That was like, I loved it. I think it was just because it was like a signature thing my mom made. So it was more emotional food connection, than
oh yeah. That's some strong nostalgia right there. Because next thing you're going to tell me that she helped train Gordon Ramsay to become the chef that he did with that signature dish, roast beef.
But here's another fun fact, because my parents lived in Boston. I was born in Boston, actually. And my mom used to shop at the same store as Julia Child.
Wow.
So apparently, when I was a little baby, Julia would talk to, she'd stop and talk to my mom in the store and talk to me. And my mom she's a really good cook. And so, I think she felt like she had a connection to Julia Child. So
there's a name drop and a half.
Taking pointers from the best there. Wow.
Sheesh.
Yeah, I like that. What's in the Yorkshire pudding?
I did not inherit the cooking. Like, my mom can bake and do things like I can't bake. And Yorkshire pudding really is, there's an art to it because it's kind of like baking. It makes me think of like popovers, like that kind of texture, which my mom also did really well. But for me, like baking is out. I can cook dinner, pastas. I can do steaks and lamb and all that stuff, but no baking skill whatsoever.
It's because you got to follow the rules. Baking's all about measurements and getting it exactly right.
Right.
Like I use recipes as a general guide to.
I'm very comfortable doing it.
Yeah,
that way, but
just double the butter and the garlic, and that's cooking from a recipe. Baking, you have to actually get it right. You don't eat garlic? Oh man,
but I have an allergy.
Controversial.
Allergies, you can't avoid those. So that's not.
We'll
I know, but you want to know something interesting? So I went to Italy a few years ago. I was really nervous about going to Italy. I love Italian food. It's probably my favorite. And I was really nervous. And I heard when you go to Italy, they don't cook with much garlic. Like when they make something with garlic, it's on the menu. Not like here where everything, if you go to an Italian restaurant, virtually everything has garlic in it, and you're a big pain in the rear if you're like me and raise your hand and want to have something made without garlic. But over in Italy, they rarely cook with it, and they think Americans overuse it because they're not as good. They don't know how to season their food, so they just use garlic and everything. So I had
everything you're saying is true. Yeah. Yeah, she's right.
Put garlic on my pizza. I put it on my street tacos. So yeah, she's nailing it. All right, Bo, same question to you. What was your favorite food as a kid growing up?
So I still remember with my grandpa, because he was a great cook, and my grandma as well was a great cook. But as soon as I was old enough to see over the countertop, we were breaking down whole chickens and throwing them in the pressure cooker and making chicken and dumplings. And it was kind of like the hybrid between Asian food and Southern comfort food, because we were making like homemade biscuit dough to throw in on top of it.
Oh my gosh.
And it was like, we're talking some of the most decadent, because we're using the whole chicken. We're not wasting anything. We're cooking the bones into stock and all that. And learning how to butcher a bird from 6-7 years old, that's a huge step in the direction for me to actually be comfortable around doing cooking from scratch now as an adult. So I always remember that. And I actually haven't tried. That's the one thing that from my childhood that I haven't even tried to recreate, because I know that I'll mess it up and it won't be exactly the same. And so I want to keep that memory alive. Like every other dish from my childhood, I've tried to recreate and then perfect and then make it better in my own style. But that's one thing, chicken and dumplings, that I will not even attempt, because I don't want to ruin the memory that I have of it.
Isn't it funny how food memories are so strong? I mean,
yeah, and opinions are even stronger. That's we get,
no kidding.
Like Matt Harmon was on here and said he didn't really like peanut butter, and we pretty much cast him away from society for that.
Yeah, he's fired. He's not.
Yeah, that's just weird.
That was so weird.
Like, and it wasn't even an allergy thing either. It was just because he didn't like it. And we're like,
that's not normal.
No, adjust the ranks.
Poor guy.
Right. I'll weigh into mine. Growing up with stuffed shells, my sisters did not like a lot of sauce on pizzas. There was just, I didn't get a lot of the spaghetti sauce. So on stuffed shells, you could go all out. You could put you could put the sausage, the cheese. I had extra cheese, and so we would. It's technically not Italian to have stuffed shells. Not really an Italian food, but it was my version of Italian food as a little kid, and I don't have it anymore. But I loved it as a kid. And it was my birthday. I'd get once a year, and I would eat, half the pan. And my family would be like, "We hate this. What's wrong with you? Like, this is my best day of my life." So, all right, next question up is, all right, getting rid of being as a kid. We all lived those moments. Now we're done. What about as an adult? Stephania, you can go anywhere you want. You get your meal. What are you going to sit down to at a restaurant that you just, this doesn't matter. The price doesn't matter. I mean,
I thought we axed the Last Supper, like death row meal from the show sheet. We're asking Stephania Bell what her death row meal would be. Who did you kill and why was it first?
I was like, yeah. Does ice cream count? Because that would be, that for sure that's on the menu. But I have to think about it, because when I go home, I always go get carnitas. And if I'm home for like 4 days, like I want, and the Bay Area, I mean, come on. Like, spoiled, so spoiled out there.
NorCal is the crucible of Mexican food.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, I pretty much love all Mexican food, but if I had to pick like my go-to, it's carnitas. So
Next time you're in town, I make some mean carnitas too.
Oh, well,
Yeah, he does.
I've accepted your invitation already.
Yes.
Bo, how about you, my friend?
I mean, other than carnitas, I'm a sucker for some traditional goat birria, which is a slow stewed goat, or you can use beef, but the traditional dish is goat. Pretty much any meat that's slow stewed in chili peppers all day, and then you actually dip the tortillas in that consomme, and then you can actually you basically have this dripping mess of pot roast tacos, and of course you can grill cheese into the tortilla. Of course, if you're lactose intolerant looking for a good time, it's pretty much just like I think Mexican food it's always eaten with your hands. You're always just dipping in. You're going in elbows deep and all kinds of good stuff. You're topping it with all sorts of things, and it's the family element. Like I have neighbors here that I barely talk to, but if I'm cooking Mexican food, I'll leave the windows open and turn my vent fan on, and I can hear them chattering, and they'll be saying out loud over the fence between us what it is I'm cooking. They can tell by the smell, and then all of a sudden I have new friends.
That's perfect. I love that. I'll say for me, it's your pizza, Bo. Staying local with Bo. When I came to NorCal, and I ate your pizza was so good. It was so delicious. You made your sauce from scratch, your dough from scratch. It was just one of my favorite. I fell asleep, Stephania, so drunk on pizza. I fell asleep, and as I'm sleeping, I woke up 5 hours later with pizza on my chest. I just ate it. I just woke up and just ate the pizza. So I'm a big fan of Bo's Pizza. Bo's Pizza is the best pizza I've ever had, not in a restaurant. And so, Bo, you're the man. I will eat that as my last meal. But we're not doing last meals, but, as my last meal. Okay, last one. And this is, you kind of already said it maybe with garlic, but it's more of a diet restriction. What is just a hot food take? Like, I hate sour cream. Sour cream is the devil. I don't want it on anything. And Bo's chided me for that for many years because I love Mexican food too, but I can't have sour cream on it. So, but what about you? What's something that maybe people will be surprised? Your Matt Harmon, no peanut butter take.
So I was trying to think about this, and I think, of course, it's because it's me. I think all the things that I hate are normal. So I don't think any of them are that hot. I don't eat.
That's a perfect pause right there.
Yeah, she doesn't eat.
She doesn't eat. I mean, I mean, that's tough not to eat.
Yeah, it's tough. But I'm at the edge of my seat when she comes back here to figure out what it is.
So, Stephania, it was you do not eat, and then just stopped right there. It was a great cliffhanger.
Yeah, I'm on the edge of my seat when she comes back to audio here. She does not eat. I'm gonna guess.
What are you guessing?
So I think because she kind of reacted with when I said goat meat. She probably doesn't eat like offals or other things like that.
Stephania, what do you not eat?
Oh, there we go. I don't eat mushrooms. I don't eat sushi.
No
I
sushi.
don't eat
Okay.
shellfish.
Okay.
I have texture issues with food. So a lot of those things have like textures that I don't care for, and but I don't think there's a lot of people who don't eat shellfish because allergies.
Hey, I'm with you on shellfish. I'm with because oysters are like, why would I eat snot? Like,
I mean, so I don't eat any of that. I don't eat sushi, and my brother is a foodie. He eats everything, like everything under the sun. And I have, but I don't have any that I think are super controversial and weird. I used to not like avocados, so I didn't eat guacamole, so that was maybe weird. But I have come around, now I love avocados. So
right, yeah. See, you were wrong for a while, and you came around to being right about avocados.
Now I've seen the light, but I don't think that I have anything that's super controversial. The only thing I could think of that I've gotten in like a food war about on social media is when you start talking about who makes the best fast food burgers, and I like In-N-Out. And then the Five Guys people come around and they yell, Whataburger people.
The Whataburger people are weird because I've had all three of them. Being from California, we have the Five Guys, we have the In-N-Out, of course. In-N-Out is far superior to all those guys. Because Whataburger, you go to Texas, it's like, well, I might as well go to Burger King if I'm going to eat Whataburger and spend half as much. And then with Five Guys, you're like, oh, it's decent. Their fries are amazing. Like they're the opposite of In-N-Out, where I think I could just live off Five Guys fries, but their burgers are just kind of meh. And they're like $18 for a burger. Like, man, take out a second mortgage to afford Five Guys. Like, it's not worth it.
Your mentions though when you slam
oh
on a burger.
God, yeah.
Good luck.
I take a hard line on In-N-Out, and it's just like, well, I mean, no such thing as bad press, I guess, for for the food.
Plus, like the double is like the most perfect burger ever,
and it's like $4. Like, come on, guys! It's like you get a fresh burger. You know everything is exactly how it came off the field.
Right,
That's how
and
fresh the produce is.
Cold. The onions are cold. I love it. It's like raw onion on my burger.
Crunch.
Stephania, I love that you brought up the texture of food, because mushrooms are on my list because of texture. Cottage cheese is on my list because of texture. There's just certain things, and maybe the taste. If you broke the taste down and refined it and put it on something like mushroom taste, that's fine. I don't care if it's in a stew or whatever.
I don't like taste.
It's fine, but I'm not. I don't want to buy anything mushroom based. But if you sneak it by me in something and I don't know, like, I'm okay with it. But if I can tell that there's a mushroom in it, like if I can feel the sliminess of a mushroom, my wife knows. I'll just
He's out. He's out.
I feel like I found my people.
I'm having an avocado moment with mushrooms recently, where I've figured out a way to cook them where they're not all slimy and gross. Like I'm with you on mushrooms mostly. Yeah, but I'm coming around on mushrooms, but it's taken a long time, because for the longest time I was completely out on mushrooms, and I'm finally starting to come around on them a little bit. But yeah, not my preference. Last food question, right? We got one more for.
Well, that was the last one. We'll end on that.
Yeah.
Well, it's what's your favorite thing to put hot box on, and the answer is everything. So has Stephania had hot box before? I wasn't sure if you said
yes.
Yes.
By the way, I have all the seasonings. I was just thinking, I actually made some tonight, because I had I'll make my own bolognese sauce with ground turkey. Yes. And I spice the meat with I use the Amigo seasoning.
Oh, the Amigo is good.
Ground turkey, and I love it.
Every food's best friend.
It is. Yeah. If you're not following Stephania Bell, I mean, there's like 5 of you left, but if you're not following Stephania Bell, please go follow her on Twitter right now. If you're not aware of who she is ESPN's lead injury analyst. She is also, Bo went through a bunch of different things that she does for ESPN, for the podcasting, for Fantasy Football Today, for so many things. You'll see her everywhere. So please go do follow her. She's like the gold standard when it comes to accurate injury information reporting in the NFL. So go do that. It'll be a good investment for your Twitter account, for your fantasy football account. And also, if you put alerts, then you can know what is happening when she tells you what's happening, when things break. So please do that as well. We're going to transition now, a little hard transition, away from food, which we all love, to fantasy football. And so I think one of the things that Bo and I talked about is trying to pick the brain of these experts, the people who are kind of in the trenches, who know not just more than us, but who know a lot more than us, right? And so I think Stephania fits into this category pretty well. And so Bo is going to kind of jump in there first, and he wants to figure out who you're drafting so we can adjust our ranks, and maybe if we've overlooked somebody, or confirming if we're right on with somebody. So Bo, I'm gonna let you go, brother.
So I'm gonna give her a layup, because I know she's a 49ers fan, and I grew up in Northern California as a hater of the 49ers, because my stepdad, rest in peace right here, John Eller, his best friend in college was Jeff Stover. I know Stephania knows who Jeff Stover is. So he would drive into the Bay Area a lot and hang out with Jeff in the locker room, hung out with Jerry Rice, Joe Montana back in those heydays. So I get why the 49er fans are everywhere around here. But I still have an undying love for Trey Lance, and I want to know how Stephania feels about Trey Lance this year.
For fantasy or for my 49ers?
Both. Lay it on me.
Well, look, I think he hasn't played a lot of football in a while, and I think we're going to see some growing pains that you would expect with somebody who's going to get their first full year in the NFL. And that's how it's been so far in camp. And if you follow what the beat writers who are there all the time are talking about, and I was out at camp for a couple of days, and I saw some different things myself, but I'm not there for the extent of time like they are. And really, it's the inconsistency, right? There's been some terrific days of practice and some days have been pretty ugly. And one of the things Kyle Shanahan talked about was he wanted to see how Trey Lance bounced back from the bad days. And after, earlier in camp when he had what was the worst day so far, he turned around and then had his best day immediately afterward. And I think things like that end up being more important for the coaching staff to see. The other thing is, Debo wasn't there. When I got to camp, Debo had only been there a couple of days. And I heard today, I think it was today's practice, that there were like 3 misses to Debo. Today was one of the not so good days. And the 49ers defense, they're really good. They're really good. And so I think the 49ers defense might be rattling the offense enough that it's creating some of these scenarios. So on the one hand, I like the fact that they're practicing against what could be the best defense in the league, because I think that's going to make them better than they otherwise would be. So I think inconsistency is probably fair to expect to some degree. I think he brings a dynamic element to his game that's going to be fun for us to watch. Obviously he's mobile, he's athletic. I think they will have some design runs for him, especially in and around the red zone. But I don't know exactly what to expect from just the overall performance point of view. I think there's going to be games where he's going to light it up, and that will probably be reflected in fantasy too. And then other games where it's sort of middling and a little bit tougher for him. But I think he'll get better as the year goes on.
I have him pretty aggressively ranked because of that rushing upside. And I think there's going to be a big bounce back for Brandon Aiyuk this season.
Yes.
So I have him aggressively ranked. I kind of feel like that the real football side of it is going to be shaky. There's going to be a lot of moments where Kyle Shanahan wants to pull out all of his hair because there's going to be mistakes made, improper alignments, bad reads at the line of scrimmage. But I still think that with his mobility, with his arm strength and arm talent and aggressiveness, one thing we didn't see from Jimmy Garoppolo was pushing the ball to the boundaries or down the field at opportune times because he didn't feel like it was what Shanahan wanted him to do. It was always the back of his mind is like, all right, if the first guy's not open, we're checking down or we're just eating it. I think there's going to be a lot more aggression in this offense, especially to Kittle and Aiyuk. And of course, the gadget plays to Debo and the downfield passing and the boundary passing, I think is just going to untap this offense where you're going to see a lot more big plays. And maybe there'll be big plays both directions because we don't know how Lance is going to react to different coverage looks and blitz packages that they're going to throw the kitchen sink at the kid because he hasn't played full-time ball since 2019.
We've seen a little of that in the preseason. We've seen a couple of these big plays that are very exciting. And so I think there's that to look forward to. You're right about Brandon Aiyuk. They have a strong connection. They spent the whole offseason together. Kyle Shanahan gave Aiyuk a lot of praise for everything that he did to come out of the funk where he was last year. Everybody remembers it was a little bit frosty between them when Shanahan basically Aiyuk disappeared after he had that hamstring issue. It wasn't really clear what was happening, and Shanahan didn't say much at the time, and to Aiyuk's credit, he didn't say a lot either, and he just kind of put his head down and could have gone 2 ways, and he chose to make it go in a positive direction. And Shanahan has been more revelatory about what was going on last year, talking this year, like in the things that he's seen that are different from Aiyuk. And so I think Trey Lance's comfort with Aiyuk is clear. Like they have a rapport, and that's who he's been looking. And I think if he gets into any sort of trouble, like that's going to be his go-to guy. And it will have to build with Debo and Kittle is. I think that it's pretty solid there too. It's just he's asked to do so much else. I don't know how involved he will be as a pass catcher. That's my only concern from fantasy. I think he'll score touchdowns, but I just don't know volume-wise. Compared to some of the other tight ends that are at that top tier, where Kittle will rank this year.
That's the $1 million question.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I like the Aiyuk take too. If you looked at him the last 2 seasons, he finished wide receiver 35 overall, both seasons. He's being drafted as a wide receiver 39, 40 right now in that range. So there's already kind of built in consistency in that, wide receiver and tail end of wide receiver 3. So only better things, I think, on the horizon for him for sure. I love that take. Let me just stick in the backfield since you're a 49ers fan. How do you see Elijah Mitchell this year? He had a little bit of a knee injury. He's going back and forth. I think he's got a hammy last year, knee injury, hammy this year. How do you see him holding up? Is he just going to be used by Kyle Shanahan like he uses everybody else until he's done and then the next one up? Or is it going to be a little bit different this year? Yeah, probably.
I mean, it's funny because when I was there, that was before he had the hamstring issue. And I was asking Shanahan what he saw as different, because Elijah Mitchell last year at training camp, I remember that there was this growing buzz about him because he was impressing everyone with how he was performing. And clearly we saw, it didn't take long or Raheem Mostert got hurt early. And then all of a sudden Mitchell was thrust forward and he just excelled. The only limitation he had was a rib injury, really, that cost him a lot. I mean, the rib injury was something that he was trying to play through, but he struggled with that. And that was part of the reason they had to offload him to some degree. But it was really interesting because I had shout out to Kyle Soppe, who's a researcher for our podcast, but I was looking at I don't know why I was looking for this, but I was looking at like the percentage of touches for running backs in the league. And Elijah Mitchell was in the top 5 in terms of the percentage of running back touches that he had relative to games played. And you wouldn't think that, right? Because you don't think of him, but it was like Derrick Henry was ahead of him and Jonathan Taylor. But I mean, all the names you would expect, and he was like 4th or 5th. I don't have the stats in front of me, but it blew me away. And that was because when they had because Deebo Samuel didn't count as a running back, so those were wide receiver touches. But when of all the running backs on the 49ers, he was definitely the one getting the most work. It's just the way their offense ran. It didn't feel like that. So when you're looking for fantasy purposes, the relative workload that an Elijah Mitchell gets, even if he's their number 1 running back, is very different than the workload a Jonathan Taylor gets. But in terms of speaking to the confidence and the trust and where they want to lean, I think that tells you a lot about what they think about Elijah Mitchell.
No, that's great insight. And
I like to take my victory laps on Elijah Mitchell too, because I had him ranked pre-draft ahead of Trey Sermon, and was surprised that Trey Sermon went and they traded up to get Trey Sermon. Then it got Mitchell later, because I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be interesting. This is going to be interesting, because the way I scouted Elijah Mitchell was way ahead of Trey Sermon as far as a prospect. So I'll take my victory lap on that one.
You should. The value they have for Elijah Mitchell, and they like, is it Tyrion Davis-Price? I don't have the name of it. They really like him. Obviously, a higher round draft pick, so, a little more draft capital on him. But he's been really impressive for them in this training camp as well. I'm still not sure that Trey Sermon, I mean, he's been getting a decent amount of work, but a part of that is you're protecting the other guys. I don't know. I really like Davis-Price too, and I think they've found the running backs that work within their system, and then they funnel the work to them.
Yeah, they do. No, and I have to victory lap Bo's victory lap, because when I was drafting him in Dynasty in the 4th round from everybody a couple years ago, and he's on all my squads. That's had to victory lap your victory lap, Bo. All right, you're up. We can move away from the 49ers, probably to your Cowboys. No, I'm kidding.
No. But actually, yeah. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Now, I want to talk about some guys that are coming back from injuries, maybe last year or the year before that. Just talking about recovery, because a lot of these guys work their tail off to get back to a level of form that they're used to. Talking Saquon Barkley, I'm talking guys that they're more than a year post-op, and we're looking at to see if they can return to 100% of their form, which we didn't really see from Saquon last year. Just as Stephania predicted, it was going to be a slow return to the top for Saquon, and plus he was on a part of a terrible offense last year. So now we have Brian Dable in town. We have more versatility in the offense. We've seen Saquon line up as a slot receiver, which is great, because if we remember his rookie season where he was RB1, he did a lot of receiving. And getting that kind of special generational talent in the open field is going to be huge, especially if Saquon's back to 100% Saquon. like Penn State Saquon. I want to see that again. Stephania, can we see 100% Penn State Saquon this year?
I think we have at least a far better chance than we did last year. It's interesting. I took a lot of heat for my thoughts about Saquon last year, and it stemmed from a few things. One was just knowing some things that had happened during the course of his rehab, understanding the extent of his procedure and recovery, and where those deficits tend to translate when guys are returning. And the hard part is the seasonal calendar drives a lot, and it doesn't get talked about enough. So unfortunately, when people cite, and I've cited some of this literature, so I understand the literature, I understand where it comes from, but you have to put it in the context of understanding that seasonal calendar isn't typically factored in. So for example, when you talk about it takes X number of months for a player to come back from injury, this and such. Well, it depends when they were injured and when they are able to come back because of when the sport is played, right? So sometimes with Achilles, we hear this all the time, especially in the older days, about how long it would take for a player to get back. Sometimes it's just because of when the season is falling. So it's hard to compare. There's some apples and oranges there. But what we know when you look at the sports population at large is that on average, athletes are returning at 9 to 10 months. It's 9 to 12, but like the average really hits at 9 to 10 post ACL. And that's isolated ACL. If you factor in other issues, are there other ligament injuries? Is there a meniscus injury? And whether that's a meniscus repair or just a tiny tear, what the joint surfaces are like, if they have cartilage defect, like all of those things can factor into what the recovery is like. And then every player responds differently to the injury. I've talked to so many between the years of treating athletes and then now just going around to different camps. I love talking to them because they give you insight. You can't get that insight from anyone else other than the athlete. And so this year I talked to Saquon, and I thought it was just, it's like I wish I could just put it in a bottle and just put it out there for everybody to hear, because for all the people who are saying, well, he was fine last year, he just had that fluky ankle injury and it was no big deal, otherwise he would have been himself. He told me he was not himself last year. He told me that he could feel the hesitation when he would get to the line. There's like a two or three step before you go forward, before you burst. And it's a instinctive protective thing you're doing for that knee. You want to see and make sure you have a clear lane. It's not conscious. And it's only in looking back that these athletes can really appreciate where they are now compared to where they were when they thought they were ready. You know what I'm saying? And that is such a nuanced thing, but it's so important. And so for Saquon, I saw him in camp this year, he looks like a different guy. And it's hard to quantify what does running with confidence look like. But for him, it's zero hesitation. It's not thinking about making a cut. And he was starting to gain some of that confidence last year when he then hurt his ankle. But he told me, and this is why we say they're connected, even if the injury is a separate injury, like he steps on a guy's foot. But he said in recovering from that, it sent him back with his knee. And then he felt like he was dealing with two things, and he just was going to be struggling the whole year. Whereas now, all of that's behind him. He has another year under his belt, way more confident in the leg. He looks the part. He's definitely going to get the volume of work. So, the only thing I worry about is there's no depth behind him really of any consequence. Right. And the amount that you expect him to get utilized, it just means more exposure. So while he's not, I would say he has the chance to be that guy that we knew pre-injury, to kind of return to that performance level that he had previously. He's at more risk because he's going to be on the field so much, and he's touching the ball. When you're touching the ball and you're running back, you're
right.
vulnerable. So pluses and minuses, right?
And I was going to say before, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I'm sorry, Stephania.
No.
You have I was thinking about, I mean, Derrick Henry injury, Dalvin Cook injury, Christian McCaffrey injuries. Like all of these top backs have dealt with injury, and they have to because they're such a, they're the focal point of multiple collisions, play after play.
Yes.
The attrition rate. I mean, I understand why there's zero wide receiver or zero RB strategies where they just like load up on wide receivers because all the running backs are gonna get hurt. You don't know who's gonna be there at the end, but it is helpful to hear that from you about Saquon and to understand the way that players do recover and how, if you tear your hamstring or you pull your hamstring, then your knee is now at risk because you are putting pressure on a different part of your body that you didn't put pressure on before. And I've done it just as a fat guy trying to recover from an ankle injury that now is a hip all these different things that happen, and you have to keep living your life. Like you have to walk to the training.
I stubbed my toe on a bed frame the other day, and I don't think I can set my lineup this week.
That is like one of the most painful things you can do.
And it happens all the damn time.
That in your shin. My wife was out of town, so I had a few beers, and I turned off the light. I know. I went to the bed, and I kind of did one of those little jumps into the bed. And I just sold myself short on the jump, and my shin hit the top of the little part of the bed, and I wasn't bleeding, but I was on the bed going, ah!
Yeah, I'm
screaming in my house by myself.
It was like you got fouled in soccer and you were down for like.
Dude, I would have gotten. They would have thrown the guy out if they saw him.
Was a good idea, but.
Don't jump in the bed, Scott. At your advanced age, so you don't know what could happen.
I'm 69 years old. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I think I remember a Stephania tweet from not too long ago, and I follow a lot of PTs on Twitter because I'm just a medical science nerd. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I do know anatomy pretty well. And you said something about psychological return to play is a factor that a lot of people don't take into account, where you get that hesitation from a guy who's maybe not 100% back mentally, even if he's physically in peak form. That's a huge thing to consider, especially for a guy that's more than a year post-op, kind of like Travis Etienne. And I'm kind of worried about Travis Etienne as far as return to play and injury risk going forward, because I've seen reports on his running style that might lend us to a higher injury risk of recidivism rate of injury of his feet just from his gait, his running style. Do you know anything about that?
I know what you're talking about. I've seen it posted. Sometimes we can get too caught up in some of those things. And I'm a PT. Like I study movement. I can't walk through an airport without analyzing like 30 different people's gait. It happens. It's part of how we are formulated to do that. That's, we're taught that's such an emphasis. So I think it's valuable. However, if you look at a lot of elite athletes, they got there by doing what they do. You cannot deconstruct them and say, okay, we're just going to change all these things. And then you're going to, because that actually can be set up for injury. Now, sometimes when someone gets hurt, who's an elite athlete, we talk about this in baseball players with Tommy John surgery. They don't ever have a break. That's a whole nother conversation about why they should have more breaks. But for many of them, they don't have a break that's that long ever as they're going through, adolescence to pitching and, potentially in college and then to pitching in minor and Major League Baseball. And then they have an elbow surgery that takes, 12 to 16 months to recover from. And during that time, they're able to peel the layers of the onion back and really get stronger in places where they had deficits and kind of rebuild themselves and become better athletes as a result. But until something like that happens, you don't want to go in and change too many things because then you can really set them up for problems. So it's hard to look at the video too and say, well, he should be running this. I mean, sometimes there's anatomical things that we don't know about. Just, somebody might have a hip joint that's a little, we could get into the weeds on some terminology, but, there can be things that set them up. And it's true, some of those things are precursors for injuries. Why at the combine, they get scanned from head to toe and all these things get looked at because people are trying to make projections based on some of those exact things. You see the anatomy, you see the tape, and you go, gosh, in a few years, this could be happening with this athlete. So I know exactly, I understand where that came from. I would say I'm not worried about him right now. I mean, he's, as far as his recovery from his foot, it's fantastic. He's feeling great. He had a nice long window after he had the injury and the surgery. He's had a good camp back. He looks amazing. And certainly he is going to be a pass catcher. And I think for fantasy purposes, he's still undervalued because James Robinson, they have plans for James Robinson, but James Robinson's also coming off an Achilles repair. And even though he's doing very well and his progression has been, it's been very steady, they're not going to overuse him early on. They're very mindful of that. He's not, I like Snoop Connor. They have there who's been getting a lot of work in camp and I think has been a bit of a surprise to some in terms of how well he's performed. But even if James Robinson is active early on, whether it's week 1, 2, 3, whenever he starts to come back, I don't think it's James Robinson, lead running back, and then Travis Etienne sometimes, or on passing downs. I really think Travis Etienne is going to get the bulk of the work. James Robinson will get some, Snoop Connor will get some, and then that may shift as the season goes along. But I love Travis Etienne, actually.
No, that's a great take.
You heard it. You heard it from Stephania Bell, everybody.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong,
I have a question
Hey,
about.
I expect your tweets.
Oh yes.
No, please don't.
I'm a little bit behind on Etienne, not because of the injury though.
Yeah. I have a question here, and this has to deal with Matthew Stafford. And I've been doing a little research on the Rams, and apparently all their running backs are injured too. They'll have soft tissue injuries. There's not a projection right now when they're going to come back. McVay is holding them out. Hopefully they can come back before the season starts or at the beginning of the season. So this is interesting. Matthew Stafford has an elbow injury. It's kind of lingering. How am I approaching this from a fantasy standpoint if I'm into the Rams I drafted last year? Or if Cooper Kupp, he's the first wide receiver off the board. He's wide receiver 1, and then Al Robinson's wide receiver 23 or so. So there's value in this offense, and people are putting it there. Should we be concerned, or is this kind of just something, he can just ice up and be okay kind of moving forward, like a pain management issue more than a debilitating issue?
Yeah, so I'll just start with everybody who's not Matthew Stafford. What I would say is it's a very Sean McVay to not play any of the starters early on. That's what he's always done. And if they have to say if somebody's missing practice, and that's why hamstring things early on. Look, the NFL has a focus on hamstring injuries right now because it's such a problem. It is the number 1 cost of lost time in the NFL. Number 1. And so lower extremity strains are, but hamstrings are predominantly it. And also, talking with Lee Weiss, who's the head PT for the New York Giants, when I was out of camp, and he was on the committee, the task force they formed to look at hamstring injuries and soft tissue injuries around the league. And now there's a research grant that University of Wisconsin has to study this longitudinally for several. I mean, this is how big of a deal it is. It's a real problem. The NFL is trying to address it. And one of the things that Lee said is that they're seeing that the recurrence rate is greater than 1 in 6 in terms of in season. So just if you have something between the start of camp, and the start of the season, 1 in 6 of them will have a recurrence of that. And then that can go on to be a nagging thing that really compromises the athlete for the entire year. Those are the guys that they don't miss the season, but you're like, are they healthy? They're not healthy. They're banged up. They're okay. Oh, they left that game early, right? That's a real problem. So I think in training camp, if a guy gets a hint, a whisper of anything in the hamstring, like, I'm feeling a little tightness, you're out. You know what I mean? It's like, we're just not going to push that. And teams have learned that this is such a potential problem that guys are pulled out. So right now, we see a lot of players listed with hamstring, but I think the spectrum of what they are is huge. That's why I'm not that worried about Elijah Mitchell. I mean, other than just in general, he's been banged up, but I'm not that worried about it. I think they're just saying, okay, we're going to be protected. Los Angeles Rams honestly have one of the best medical staffs in the league and very proactive. So for all of those other things, I'm not really that worried. I'll worry more when it gets the start of the year. Not really that worried. Yeah. And as far as Stafford, that elbow issue, I mean, I was looking back because I had to remind myself when he came in the league. And I think 2009, was that his first season?
Yep.
So in 2010, he only played 3 games, I believe. And he had one other season where he played less than 16 games. And every other year, he's played every single game in the season. And last year, that was 17 regular season games and then every game up to and including the Super Bowl. So, yeah, as a thrower with that kind of mileage on his arm, you expect to have wear and tear on the soft tissues there. You expect it to be something, there's age-related decline in throwers. We see it in baseball more so than football, but it certainly happens. And he was having discomfort last year, still managed to win a Super Bowl, but they wanted to treat it when the season ended. Their season didn't end until late February, really, in all intents and purposes in terms of treatment. So you have a rest period, you see how the elbow is doing. If that doesn't resolve it, you go to a PRP injection, then you have to wait 6 or 8 weeks before you can start throwing. Then you have a return to throwing program. You see you're run out of time. So when he came back and it's camp, he's still in the final phase of that progression. And when he was working on his own, people are like, oh, what's wrong with Matthew Stafford? He's working on his own. Well, yeah, so then everybody knew, right? Because that's where he was. But he was on the schedule that they had laid out for him. And if you look now, he's been back in full practice. He's making all the throws. He's doing everything and feeling better. So the fact that he's been able to
don't panic
through the program without any setbacks makes me feel much better that this has actually helped him. Does it mean he's guaranteed to get through the season? No, it's an older thrower with a throwing elbow issue. However, I'm not overly concerned because we also know that he's gotten through it before when it's been problematic, and now he's actually had a pretty intensive course of treatment. So,
I will not be sharing this with my home league, this part of the interview. And I'll also be, when I come in, saying, man, Matthew Stafford's elbow, can you believe it, boys? I'll be saying it the whole draft.
Yeah, he looks like Chet Stedman and Rookie of the Year, all iced up. Can't even lift his arm up above his elbow.
Yeah, I'll make a gif of Matthew Stafford all injured, and I'll send it to my league mates and be like, dude, can you believe it? So, but
I think and this is the thing, this is where it matters if you have a really good medical staff, because I bet you everybody's going to be very proactive during the season. Recovery is going to be a really important part of the weeks for him. What he does during the week is going to be different than what maybe he did 6-7 years ago. Everything is going to be built around how do we protect him and get him through a long season.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right, but one more, and then we'll get Stephania out of here because I know there's just one more person that you're itching to ask her about because Bo always has questions. That's the best thing about Bo. He's thinking. He's like a supercomputer who's an NFL with a lean towards NFL. That's one of the reasons I love him so much. So I'll let Bo go out. And Stephania, by the way, thank you so much. We are huge fans of yours. I've been ESPNing since 2000 and
it's a verb.
It totally is. Fantasy footballing and on ESPN since 2004, before I got married, and my wife had to be in the team. Then fiance, she had to be in the league. We didn't have enough guys. We had 10. My wife was in there, and I drafted for her because she was out doing something with her friends. And I was like, man, this is great. We've never stopped. And we're 18 years into ESPN.
That's
so
awesome.
Thank you so much. You've been around since the beginning. So this is the coolest thing. I told all my friends at school, I'm a 3rd grade teacher here in Maryland. I told them all, hey, casually just dropped it like, I am talking to Stephania Bell on the show tonight. And they're like, what? What? So I texted one of the guys, we're like, you're crazy. So this is
not very often. Yeah. The Wikipedia thing is actually true because It comes down to like there's only certain numbers of guests that we can have on where I could say a name and everybody in the family knows exactly who you're talking about.
Aw.
And not just know who you are by name and then of course face, but actually have a built-in amount of respect for you because like if you know anything about me is that my TV hasn't left ESPN since 2007. And so you've been on my TV so many nights, like coming in on Sports Center or doing NFL Live, all those shows that you show up on, and of course the Fantasy Focus podcast, which is always playing before and after Matthew Berry. It just comes down to we all know and love you, Stephania, and so this next
Aw.
question, I don't want you to break my heart on because it is going to be about.
That's very
Yeah.
nice of you. And by the way, shout out to all the teachers. That's awesome that you're a third grade teacher.
I love it. It's 20 years in, and right now I have my daughters in 6th grade, other daughter in 4th grade. They came in today and they helped me put up my borders, and oh my gosh, like I've always just been a lone guy there, putting up these like 30-foot borders with white paper, dying, trying to do it myself. Just they came, they both helped me. I did all the borders today. I told them, girls, like, you made my day. I was
That's
like,
the cutest thing
best day I've
ever.
ever. I took pictures. Like, are you going to put this on Twitter? I said, no, I'm showing your mother how much you blessed me. Let me show her these pictures. So thank you.
That's
Being a
great.
teacher, listen, this is crazy.
Wow.
I love this, but I can't wait to go to bed to then go to get up and then like go put more stuff into my classroom and set it up. And no kids are there yet. So it's just, it's
I
like an
love it.
electric time. I pulled in the parking lot this morning and I yelled, F yeah, by myself. No one was there. I was just like, come on, calm down, Scott. You're getting excited. So, all right, Bo, don't, she's going to break your heart. You know, she is. So,
So it is about my beloved Dallas Cowboys and my guy from Colorado State, Michael Gallup.
Love him.
So Michael Gallup, great downfield receiver, great ball skills. He is coming off the late ACL from January, I believe. I think he also delayed his surgery into February, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even March.
February.
Because he had some extra cartilage damage or swelling that they wanted to subside before they performed his ACL repair.
Which is not uncommon, by the way. That's very typical that you wait a few weeks
Yeah.
before.
So from what I understand is he's personally come out and said he feels great. He's on track, but he's definitely not ready for week 1 or anywhere close to that. Is there an ETA on Michael Gallup returning to the Cowboys receiver core this season?
Oh, no.
And when is it? And is it going to be too late for us Cowboys by the time he gets back? Oh, she froze. See, that's what happens as we talk about the Cowboys.
Cowboys make everybody.
She didn't want to give me bad news,
Who
so
wants to talk about the Cowboys, Bo? Come on.
she's like, "Oh, we're gonna click the router, so we don't have to talk about the Cowboys."
I like how she her audio cuts out because she's
like, "No Cowboys questions. We went over this.
No, this is it. It's over.
We went over this pre-show. No Cowboys questions."
Yeah, she's back. I think I can hear her. Yeah, there she is.
I don't think it was an accident that it went
No.
off, right?
That's exactly what I said. Is as soon as I bring up the Cowboys, she clicks out. I'm like, "Oh no, the router went out."
That was the universe intervening on your behalf, so you didn't have to hear anything that I was about to say. Well, if we've learned it, since we have a teacher, what have we learned from talking about these injuries on this show? Is that first year back is tough, and it's a little bit tougher, I think, for running backs in general than wide receivers. But again, it depends on every individual circumstances, the nature of the injury, confidence. Just from what you said about what he has said, what does that tell you about where his confidence is? It's not there yet, and nor should it be. This is a very recent injury. Do you remember what he did when he tore his ACL? Do you remember how it happened?
Was that touchdown?
Yeah,
he scored a touchdown. He came down and his knee just barely tweaked inward, and he hobbled off. But it wasn't like a crazy like, oh, he's out. It wasn't like Odell Beckham going down in the Super Bowl where you're like, oh crap, that's an ACL.
No, but I saw it and I was like, I immediately thought he tore his ACL, but I was impressed that he hung onto the ball and made the play like that. That to me just shows you the elite level athlete skills that he would be able to dissociate that, because it's depending on how it happens for the athlete, because people feel it differently, but it's very it's like a nauseating feeling, right? Because you feel your knee slipping. It's like the joint is slipping out of its normal position. So to be able to compartmentalize that in that moment and still score the touchdown is totally amazing. But yeah, February, and what did we say before? 9 to 10 months on average for return. So that would put him closer to November, and it doesn't mean that he wouldn't be back before then, but again, return to play, return to performance, they're two different things. And the Cowboys invested enough in him that this is not a 1-year deal. No. And that's good. That's good for him, but it's also important for them. Why would they return someone too soon and put them at risk? And it's not necessarily the graft or worry like they're going to re-tear their ACL. It's the worry about some other injury, some other compromise, because they're trying to come back before they're really strong enough to do so. And I think them holding him back is the smart thing. So he might be able to come back and be a late season contributor, but for fantasy purposes, I'd probably be avoiding him.
Yeah, I've been doing that because of the time frame. It's hard because I love him as a player, but like you said, return to performance for me is important, and especially as a dynasty player, I'm just holding on to him and hoping he comes back fully. And he still has a history of groin injuries and hamstring injuries and ankle injuries that if you rush him back, all those things come back to the forefront, where he's the type of player, he's a vertical receiver that's going up and down, a lot like Mike Williams of the Chargers, where they're violent receivers. They're playing above the rim. They're playing a sport that a little bit differently than a lot of players at the same position even. That concerns me. I don't want him to rush back, and I don't think Cowboys, by signing that contract, want him to be rushed back either. That's exactly what I thought.
And the last thing you want is a guy going out and playing cautious, because that's a recipe for disaster. So you want them, and it's just going to happen, just inherently when you're first back on the field, you're first, there's the butterflies of it and sort of how is this going to hold up? But I mean, bigger than that. Like, they're cautious about everything. They don't really trust the leg yet. And these are all things that when you've worked with athletes on the rehab side, it's there, but we're not great at quantifying it. We don't have great objective measurements. It's getting better with some of the tools that they're using in terms of metrics, because they can show people, all these GPS tools that a lot of the teams are using, where they can see, acceleration, deceleration, things that are not the same as they were before. They can see how guys are fatiguing. They can show them that. So they are getting some kind of feedback to go with what they think is happening. And I think that's helpful, but it's still a gray area for a lot of people. And that knowledge of when is the absolute right time for someone to return, there isn't a formula that tells you exactly when. So I appreciate when clubs are not rushing people back, especially if they're getting the vibe from the player that they're not ready.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said too about the investment. They it's not like this guy has to make it or break it. He's got to rush back to figure out if he's going to be in a contract year. They signed him. They said, we like what we've seen from you. We're investing in you, and we want to keep you. So that's great. By the way, Stephania, we did forget something because we got wrapped up in it. We wanted to be able to showcase your shirt because
my
so. Yeah, her Canes. So I just want to say something. As
Miami.
a little kid, Miami, I live in Maryland, and Miami was my favorite team because they were on TV, right? And I was a little kid. I didn't know much. Oklahoma was on TV. Nebraska, I didn't really like them. I didn't like Penn State. I like Penn State okay, but Miami was awesome in the 80s. And so that's when I started liking Miami as a little kid. And I bought the starter hat, Miami hat.
Oh, yeah.
And I rocked that at school. And I thought I was like the coolest little kid in school.
Actually,
so I don't have any gear from back then in the day, but when I saw your shirt, I was like, oh my gosh, like my old young Scott memories of I was a football fan. My origin story is my grandma loved football. and she was a Raiders fan, and she lived in DC, and so she invited me over to the Super Bowl. I was always over at their house for parties and things, and so we were over at my grandma's, and I watched the Redskins get destroyed by the Raiders, and they just crushed them, and she was so happy.
That's
and
awesome.
my dad was like, "Hey, we're from Washington, like that was our team," and I was like, "Oh man, this is bad." He was like, "It's terrible. It's like the worst." I was like 4 years old, and I remember vividly sitting there. They're smoking cigarettes, and I'm just watching. I'm watching the game. There's coconut cake. I'm like, "This is the greatest game of the world. What is this game?" Like
Some things never change.
No, and then I went home, and the funny part is, I watched the Bengals Super Bowl with Joe Montana and the 49ers down in my grandma's basement. There was a party upstairs, and just me down there by myself, like watching. My dad's like, "We got to go home." I'm like, no. Joe Montana's driving. We're not going anywhere at all, Dad. Like, are you kidding me? We're staying at grandma's. So I love football, and it's been really cool to be able to connect with you about all of this stuff. And please tell people who are new to the world, who just woke up from a coma, where can they find you? Where can they find your work? And also maybe what you're coming up with next, if you have a podcast this week or something that's kind of fresh that they can hear, tomorrow at SportsCenter or whatever.
Yeah, I won't be on air the next 2 days, but Thursday, Friday, I'm doing our Fantasy Focus podcast. So you can find us there. We are, it's from 11 to 12 Eastern, and it's live in the ESPN Fantasy app. It's live on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, and then the audio version available wherever you get your podcasts. And then Fantasy Football Now is our Sunday pregame show, and that will start. Normally it starts week 1, but this year we're going to have a preview show that's going to air the Sunday of Labor Day weekend. So that's kind of fun. Get everybody ready for any of those big drafts that are coming up last minute. But that is 10 to 1 on ESPN2 every week before. That's where we get you ready for the game with all the reporters and
I watch it
insiders,
every single Sunday. That is,
like, you name it. So
he watches it instead of my DFS show that I do every Sunday morning. He watches that show instead. I can't blame him, but
I love you. But like, my kids know when they hear ESPN the music come on the show for the intro, they're just like, "Uh-oh, Dad's gone. We lost Dad on Sunday." And I love my kids. I'm just like, "Yeah, you have." And then my best part is they know Sundays are coming, right? It's like every week, and they'll be like, "Is it Sunday?" And then they'll all be upset. And then when I'm watching football, they'll be upset that I'm watching football. I'm like, I can't win. But my girls are amazing. They're incredible. Bo knows that. And Bo's girls are incredible too. So thank you so much, Stephania. If you don't follow Bo McBrayer, please follow him. Bo_McBigTime. Also, he is the king of spice. The hottest take out there in the world is from him, and it's the Hot Box Batch. Go get yourself some Hot Box Batch right now. Hotbox.co. Is that what it is? Hotbox? No. Big Time Flavor Co. I'm rusty. I did a good
it's
show.
His first day. First day on the job.
He always breaks me down. I always mess up on something. BigTimeFlavor.co. Go down there, get your stuff. Denny Carter got your bottle of Hot Boxes. He was Hot Box Batch. He loved it. He was really excited. So please do that. Stephania loves it too. She's had it. So last question. That's how we're getting out. Stephania, what's your favorite thing to put it on? Mine is eggs. Make some egg sausage, whatever. Throw some Hot Box on. How about you?
Well, like I said, I use it on the meats all the time. Like whatever I'm making, whether it's what I gave you my turkey, my burgers. Like I do all the seasoning with it. I've tried them all. Whether it's meat that I use in tacos, because after all, there's taco seasoning, right? Of course, I'm using it in tacos. But I love putting that on meat. I've actually tried it as a dry rub too on ribs. Good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Bo. I know you like putting Hot Box on Hot Box and then eating it, but please give me yours.
So I actually started this new thing where instead of rimming my margarita glass with tequila and then kosher salt, I do the Hot Box hot sauce and then kosher salt, and then pour my margarita in the glass that's rimmed with Hot Box and kosher salt. That, my friends, is nirvana. Or as they say in Spanish, cielo. That is cielo right there.
Bo is all NorCal. He is flavor and Hot Box. Stephania, thank you so much. You're awesome. You are the best. This has made my night, and can't wait to watch you all season on ESPN. Bo, maybe somebody will watch us this year on DFS, but we'll see you guys next time on Chalk.